Hello, and welcome to the Novus North Expert Series. This is a forum where we chat with industry thought leaders about all things related to client experience and financial services. I'm Michelle Palomera, the Chief Growth Officer and one of the co-founders at Novus North. Today, I'm excited to introduce Marie Chinnici-Everitt. Marie is the founder and principal of MCE Strategic Consulting. She has 3 decades of experience serving as the former CMO for several large organizations in the financial services industry. And Marie has been a client of mine several times over the years. So I'm very excited to have her on our episode today to discuss the role that brand plays in client experience. Hi, Marie. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of the series. As you said, I'm Marie Chinnici-Everitt. I've spent the majority of my career in financial services with 3 decades of experience. I spent the first part and the lion's share of my career at Merrill Lynch and then Bank of America Merrill Lynch after the acquisition in 2008. And the last 12 years prior to starting my own endeavor was at DTCC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, where I was the Chief Marketing Officer. So I have extensive experience across all aspects of marketing, strategy, and communications, including PR and crisis communications.
Great. Marie, I was hoping we could open up with setting some context for our audience. And you've seen quite a bit in your over the course of your career. So I was hoping you could share some perspectives on what some of the drivers are that compel companies to rebrand.
Of course. And there's many. Companies will often embark on a rebrand for very different reasons. In some cases, companies will go through a corporate event, whether it's a restructuring, an acquisition, or a divestiture, where their portfolio or suite of products and services will either expand significantly or, in some cases, contract, requiring them to rethink how they go to market and position themselves differently. In other cases, companies are thinking about how they continue to elevate their organizations and want to convey to their stakeholders that they have momentum. So they will continue to refresh their brands. World-class companies will do this every 3 to 5 years to think about how they continue to show their stakeholders that they're relevant and that they're keeping pace with the times. As we all know, there's incredible change in the macroeconomic environment, the geopolitical environment, and
Mhm.
certainly in B2B with new entrants into the marketplace as competitors. So you need to make sure that you continue to differentiate yourselves as an organization. And that's really why companies will think about rebranding their organizations.
That's really helpful. And I know in some cases, like in high tech, we've even seen examples of companies like MongoDB narrow the scope of their offering and make a strategic pivot. And as a result, kind of rebrand on the basis of that new focus. And obviously, we've worked with you on a number of these initiatives. So it's been exciting to see. Um, and just to sort of build on that a little bit, could you touch on what a rebrand or a refresh may entail? I feel like a lot of people just immediately think of logos and identity changes, but there's probably a lot more to it. And if you could also touch on, some various approaches on how companies can think about this, especially if they don't have larger budgets.
Sure. And actually, most organizations that endeavor to rebrand often don't have big budgets. Large corporations and many of those that you've been familiar with over the years, particularly in the consumer space, will often go through very extensive rebrands that involve not only changing their visual identity, but all elements and aspects of how they go to market, including refreshing their logo. Most companies actually do not refresh their logo because oftentimes there's a lot of equity that's been built up over the years in their organizations. So a brand refresh can be quite small and narrow, or it can be extensive. In terms of the approaches that organizations will take, most companies start with understanding the environment. So, what are the drivers of the environment that are causing them to embark on a rebrand? Understanding their customers, how their customers' needs have been evolving, which will often entail extensive research. Understanding how the competitive landscape is changing. Oftentimes, there's new entrants into the marketplace that will drive an organization to think differently about how they go to market, how they position themselves. It's really important that you define white space. The last thing that any company wants to do as they're thinking about their brand or rebranding is going to market in a way that's similar to their competitors. If you really want to compete effectively, you need to understand what the differentiators are and why clients need to or want to do business with you that sets you apart from everybody else in the sphere that you're operating.
Thanks, Marie. Just further getting into more detail, could you share some best practices on how to approach this for our audience?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the importance of understanding clients and doing client research.
Mhm.
And within that research, it's good to really understand that not one size fits all for your client base. Clients are not all alike, and you have certain segments of clients, whether it is roles within your client organization, it could be geographic, it could have something to do with the different businesses that your organization operates, but you need to understand what each segment of your client wants from your organization, needs, and also thinks about your organization, the perceptions that they have. Once you have that base of data, it's also important to understand the competitive landscape as we talked about. So, how do your competition, your key competitors, go to market? What are their messages? How are their offerings different from your own? What is their visual representation of their company? So that you can start to identify the white space and start to think about how do you set yourself apart from the pack. The other thing when you rebrand, especially if you're going through a wholesale rebrand, it's important to be courageous. Oftentimes, as a chief marketing officer, I've experienced it. I know working together, Michelle, we've experienced this together, is that organizational leadership tends to be very conservative. And when
Oh, yeah.
you really want to elevate your company and make big, bold moves, it requires courage. It requires stepping out from what may be comfortable and taking a chance. Obviously, if you're in a highly regulated industry like financial services, you don't want to go crazy, but you want to be responsibly innovative. You want to think about how you set yourself apart within the guardrails of the industry that you operate in. And that's oftentimes what differentiates how a B2B company may think about a rebrand versus a B2C company. So, really having the data in front of you before you start the process and start to work across all elements of the rebrand, whether it's identifying your vision, which is the North Star, the aspirational goal that you have for your company, your mission, the statement of what your company does, maybe even look at
Mhm.
the core values of your organization, those beliefs, those fundamental beliefs that drive you as an organization and all of the actions. And then, of course, your marketing pillars, your value proposition, how you want to strategically position yourself externally as a company to your stakeholders. And all of those elements start to build from the research that you've done.
Those are great insights, and I know that we've, worked with you in the past and in a variety of aspects, both on conducting primary research with clients, as well as creating, or updating segmentation models to help support that and to provide a framework to which you can tie data to so that you can better analyze it to as an input to things like decision making around rebrands or go to market strategies and etc. So let's try to make this connection between brand and client experience for our audience and get into some of your thoughts on how we can really ensure that your brand is expressed through all aspects of your client life cycle and client experience.
It, it's really, really important to put the client front and center. Organizations that don't go to market effectively often take a product centric approach versus a client centric approach. You always have to put the client at the center of all of your messaging and everything that you do, because they're the ones that keep you in business. They're the ones that are the difference between success and failure. So it's important to be authentic in how you go to market. The last thing you want is to talk about what you bring to your clients and then have the clients have a very different experience when they work with you. So if your differentiator is service, you want to make sure that they don't experience bad service, delays, or lack of responsiveness. If your differentiator is core product innovation, you don't want to be a laggard in the market. You want to be first in market. You want to have the most technologically savvy and advanced product. So it's really important to understand those things and be true while you're at the same time being edgy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, how would companies sort of get started on some of this? I know, we at Novus North, help clients with things like journey mapping and conducting service design that provides a little more insight into sort of the end-to-end, client experience and where some of those opportunities are and ways to tie the data to the various parts of the experience. But tactically, what should companies be doing first and how?
Absolutely. So I don't want to suggest that these elements that I'm going to talk about need to be overly extensive or overly expensive. But it is
Mhm,
important that you touch on all of these as you think about rebranding. One, understanding the market forces, the environment that you're operating in, and the anticipated changes in that environment. What do you expect to be happening over the course of the next 2 to 3 years? It's also important, as I mentioned, to understand your client. What's happening in your clients' organizations based on segment? Are they going to be experiencing extensive regulatory change? Are they going to be experiencing cost pressures? Like, what is their world looking like so that you can demonstrate that you are relevant to them in the world that they operate in? And then
mhm,
understanding, as I mentioned, the competitive environment and the white space. So, depending on how big and bold you want to be, may determine how big and extensive each of these component parts of your research, are. It's also important to understand how your internal audiences are thinking about your company. So, conducting some element of research within the organization, your leadership team, the vision that they have for your organization, the aspirations they have, and make sure that that gets reflected back in the work that you do. And employees at different levels. And very importantly, companies often forget to talk to their early career professionals, employees that are new to the organization, to understand why they joined, to
mm,
understand what their hopes are, and where they expect their careers to take them. You don't often think that this is important, but it's extremely relevant in how you position yourselves, not only to your clients, but also to employees and to potential employees. So once that base of work is done, you can start to lay out some of the elements of your brand. I mentioned your vision, the North
Mhm.
Star, sort of clearly defining what your aspiration is as a company, a crisp statement of that vision. And then a mission, articulating clearly what you do. And companies will refresh their vision and mission somewhere every 3 to 5 years.
Mm.
And vision and mission are very important, not only to how you express yourself as a marketing organization to your stakeholders, but they are the underpinning of your company's strategy. Every company, their strategy and their strategic pillars needs to ultimately tie up to the mission and vision of the organization. So, branding is really important. It fundamentally is the external expression of your company's strategy. So, it can't be separate and apart. It has to be the articulation of the business that you're in and where you're taking that business.
Yeah, that's so true. And Marie, I'd have to say, like, you're a pro at aligning stakeholders because those initiatives are tough. And getting a large organization on the same page around core values and mission and topics like that is very, very difficult. Um, so I just want to, mention that, and I've seen you in action. Um, and it's so true, and a lot of companies don't think to pull in the internal sort of employee experience around that to help, reflect on, you know, have the core values shifted and what is the feedback and the experience of the internal employees. So that's a very valid point, and I think making that connection, because oftentimes it sits in marketing and that connection to, HR, the internal employee base isn't always made. So I think that's very valid. Uh,
Yeah, that alignment that you're mentioning, Michelle, sort of that top to bottom alignment within the organization. If you think about it, whether you're a large company or a small company, your best ambassadors are your employees. Whether you're at a weekend barbecue and you're talking about what you do for a living, you're an expression of your company's brand. If
mhm.
you talk about the culture and it's a bad culture, you may be talking to a potential client. Why would a client want to do business with an organization that has a bad reputation or bad culture? So you need to make sure that once all of this work is done, that you're spending as much time communicating within your organization, helping your stakeholders that are the expressions of your brand tell the story in a crisp, clear way that is very consistent. Everybody needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet.
It's so true. Well, Marie, thank you so much for your thoughts today. I know our audience will get a lot out of this, and I encourage them to reach out if they need help on their branding initiatives and or client experience. So we'll make sure to include your contact information on the post and the webpage. So thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for being such a great partner over the years.
Thank you, and thanks for being a great client.